I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but here I am, and I need to get it off my chest. My name's Jacob, and I was married to Lisa for about 8 years. We had a daughter, Emma, who was everything to us. She was only 5 when she suddenly got sick and passed away. That whole period was a nightmare. We were shattered, and honestly, I thought Lisa was grieving as much as I was, if not more. She was crying, acting like she was devastated, and I tried to be there for her, trying to hold everything together for Emma's sake. At first, things seemed normal after Emma's funeral. I kept telling myself Lisa needed time to heal, and I gave her space. But slowly, I started noticing little things. She was more secretive, hiding her phone a lot, even when I was in the same room. She'd get calls and quickly hide her screen or leave the room to answer. She'd cancel plans last minute, claiming she was too tired, or she'd be taking some time for herself. Like a whole lot of me time she never cared about before. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed, but deep down I felt something was off. Then the texts started. Not just one or two, but a string of messages that seemed inappropriate. She'd delete them quickly, but I caught snippets here and there. At first I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe it was just work stuff or some old friend reaching out. But her phone was constantly buzzing, and she was definitely hiding something. One night I decided to check her phone when she was asleep. I know that's probably invasive, but after everything I just needed to know. I unlocked her phone and immediately noticed the messages from a number I didn't recognize. They were flirty, intimate, things I'd never seen from her. She was talking about sex, about meeting up, about how much she missed him. The messages weren't just friendly banter. They were full-on conversations filled with desire and plans. My stomach dropped. I felt like my world was crumbling. The worst part: the messages were from my brother, Mark, my own brother. During the funeral, while I was holding Emma's tiny coffin, Lisa was texting him these things. I couldn't believe it. How could she betray us like that, especially now? It was like she was grieving her way, lying, hiding, and secretly screwing around with my own flesh and blood. I sat there in the dark, clutching her phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. My mind was racing. How long has this been going on? Were they just texting, or was it more? I could see the messages, their tone getting more intense, more desperate. It was obvious that they'd been doing this behind my back for a while. I felt sick, angry, hurt, every emotion colliding at once. I didn't wake her up then. I needed to think. I needed to process what I just found. But I knew one thing: I couldn't ignore it anymore. This was beyond betrayal. It was a punch to the face, and I was wide awake now. The next morning I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I couldn't sleep after what I'd seen. My mind kept replaying the messages, the images of her and Mark together, their betrayal laid bare on that tiny screen. I kept asking myself how she could do this, how she could cheat on me with my own brother, especially after everything Emma had been through. It felt like my entire world was shattering piece by piece. I stayed in bed for a while, trying to come up with a plan. I knew I couldn't confront her immediately. I needed to gather my thoughts, think about what I'd say, what I wanted from her. But honestly, I was furious. Not just angry, but seething with betrayal. I kept going over the texts, the secret messages, the lies she'd told me about grieving. She played the part well, crying, hugging me, acting like she was just as devastated about Emma's death as I was. Meanwhile, she was secretly screwing around with my brother. I couldn't wrap my head around how she could lie so easily, manipulate everyone around her. Later that day, I decided I'd talk to Mark. I needed to hear it from him, even if I already knew the truth. I couldn't keep this secret inside anymore. I arranged a meeting with him, telling him I needed to talk about something important. When Mark showed up at my place that evening, I was already wound up tight. I confronted him straight away, dropping the bomb about the messages, about the affair. His face went pale, and he tried to deny it at first, but I had the proof. I threw her messages in his face, demanded to know how he could do this, how he could betray me, our family, our daughter. Mark stammered, trying to justify it, saying they were just lonely, that she was pretending to be grieving but was really just using that as an excuse for her affair. I felt like I was losing my mind. How long had they been doing this? Was Emma just a cover for their secret world? All the questions, all the pain came rushing in. Mark looked genuinely guilty, but I knew that didn't erase what he'd done. I told him to leave, that I needed space, that I couldn't see him anymore. I was furious, but inside I was also devastated. I thought I knew my wife. I thought she was the one I could trust with everything. Turns out I didn't even know her at all. That night I sat alone in my house, staring at the phone that had all her messages. I felt numb. My hands shook as I thought about how I'd been played like a fool. I kept asking myself if I should confront her right then or wait. Every fiber of my being told me to call her, to ask her why. But I also knew, deep down, that nothing she could say would undo what she'd done. The betrayal wasn't just about the cheating. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the way she lied to my face during Emma's funeral, pretending to be grieving while she was secretly with my brother. I decided I'd wait. I wanted to approach her with a clear mind, but I knew that was impossible. I was already planning my next move. I couldn't live like this, knowing she'd been unfaithful, especially with someone so close to me. And the worst part, I still loved her somehow, even after all of this. But love wasn't enough anymore. Trust was gone. I was hurt in ways I didn't think were possible, and I knew that everything I'd believed in was shattered. I just didn't know what came next. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her lies, the messages from her and Mark. I kept asking myself how I'd been so blind, how I didn't see it sooner. I had moments of anger, pure rage that boiled over whenever I thought about her sneaking around behind my back, especially during the funeral, when I was vulnerable and trying to grieve our daughter. It felt like she used that moment to get closer to him, to hide her affair under the guise of mourning. Meanwhile, she kept insisting she was grieving, that I was overreacting, that she and Mark were just comforting each other, whatever that meant. She acted bitchy, dismissive, like I was just some obstacle she had to deal with, not her husband who just found out his wife was screwing his brother. She was so good at lying, I swear. Every time I brought it up, she'd turn it around, call me paranoid, or accuse me of not trusting her. "You're just jealous," she'd say with that nasty smirk. "Mark's just a friend. You're being ridiculous." Yeah, right. That's what she wanted to believe, but I wasn't buying it anymore. One night, I decided I'd had enough of her bullshit. I sat her down, looked her right in the eyes, and told her I knew everything, that I saw the messages, that I knew she'd been sneaking around with Mark while she pretended to grieve Emma. She rolled her eyes, scoffing like I was just some crazy guy. Then she started lying even more, saying it was all a mistake, that she loved me, that Mark was just a weak moment, and that I was overreacting. But I'd had enough of her lies. I told her I didn't want to hear her excuses anymore. I told her I was done pretending I didn't know the truth. Her reaction was infuriating. She got bitchy, snapping at me, saying I was ruining everything, that I was paranoid and jealous. She called me insecure and said I was overreacting because I couldn't handle her being independent and free. That she was entitled to her feelings, and if she wanted to have sex with Mark, she could. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was so callous, so cold, like she didn't care about me or what she'd done. It was like she was just annoyed I found out, like I was the one in the wrong for discovering her betrayal. I felt my blood boiling. That's when I realized I couldn't keep going like this. I was exhausted emotionally, sick of the lies, enraged at how she was trying to manipulate me into thinking I was crazy. I told her I was leaving, that I couldn't stay in a marriage where I couldn't trust her anymore. She tried to guilt-trip me, crying fake tears and saying I was ruining her life, but I wasn't about to buy into her drama. I knew I had to get out, to save what little self-respect I had left. That night I packed a bag and left. I didn't want to stay in that house, not with her and her lies hanging over my head. I went to a friend's place and stayed up all night, trying to process everything. I felt numb, broken, but also somehow relieved that I finally faced the truth. The betrayal hit hard, but I knew I wouldn't let her destroy me completely. I was starting to see things clearly now, how much she lied, how much she manipulated, and how deeply she'd hurt me and Emma even after death. The pain was raw, but part of me was already starting to accept that I couldn't go back, not anymore. The following days were a mess. I kept replaying everything in my head, her sneaking around, the messages, her smug attitude when I confronted her. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, that look of disdain when she told me I was just paranoid or jealous. I felt so betrayed, so utterly broken. How could she do this to us? To Emma. The woman I thought I knew. She was nothing but a bitchy liar, hiding her true self behind a pretty face and fake tears. I decided I needed to see her again, face to get some closure. I wanted to hear her lie straight to my face, tell me it was all a mistake, that she loved me. But I also knew that would be a mistake. Still, I couldn't just walk away without telling her how much she destroyed me. I called her, asking her to meet. When she showed up, she was her usual bitchy self, rolling her eyes before even saying hello. "Look," I started, voice trembling but firm. "I know everything. The messages, the lies. I saw what you did with Mark. During the funeral, when I was trying to get through losing Emma, you were screwing my brother. How could you lie to me like that? How could you pretend to be grieving while you were sneaking around with him? Don't even bother denying it." She scoffed at first, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, Jacob, you're so paranoid. I was just talking to Mark to get some comfort. Emma's death hit me hard too, you know. I was just trying to cope. You think I'd cheat on you during the worst time of our lives? Get real." I looked at her, feeling my stomach turn. "That's bullshit, Lisa. I found your phone, the messages, the sex talk, the plans to meet up. You lied to my face, said you were grieving while you were planning your secret affair. How do you sleep at night?" She rolled her eyes again, a nasty grin on her face. "You're overreacting. It's not what you think. Mark and I are just friends. Just because I was upset doesn't mean I cheated. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Nothing, nothing. My blood boiled. She was so good at lying, so manipulative. I saw right through her act. I knew she was just trying to brush it off, to make me doubt myself. That's exactly what she's always done, lied, lied, lied. And now, after everything, I saw her for what she really was, a bitchy, selfish woman willing to screw her own brother behind my back, all while pretending to be grieving our daughter. I told her to leave, that I was done, that I didn't want her in my life anymore, not after this kind of betrayal. She looked at me with that condescending smirk and said, "You're overreacting. You're just jealous because Mark and I have something you'll never understand." That was the moment I realized she didn't care. She didn't care about me, about Emma. She only cared about herself and her stupid affair. I walked away from her that day feeling empty. All the trust, all the love, I'd built it up over years, shattered into a million pieces. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she do this? How could she turn my grief into an excuse for her betrayal? I guess I was naive to think she was different. She's just a bitchy liar who'd rather screw her brother than face her own guilt. That night I sat alone in my house, staring at the wall, thinking about everything. I knew I couldn't stay married to someone like her. Not anymore. I'd lost a lot, the love, the trust, the sense of security. But if I learned anything, it's that sometimes you have to lose everything to see the truth. And the truth is, Lisa was never the woman I thought she was. She's just a bitchy, selfish woman who used my grief as an excuse to cheat and lie. And I'm done. Done with her, done with the betrayal. Now I just have to figure out how to pick up the pieces and move on. The days that followed were some of the hardest I've ever faced. I stayed at a friend's house for a while, trying to distance myself from the chaos. Every time I thought about her and Mark, I felt that deep, searing ache inside, the kind that makes your chest hurt and your mind race. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I could have been so blind to her true nature. It's like I was living in a nightmare, only I knew it was real. I started to see a counselor, not just for the pain, but also to try to understand how I got here. Part of me wanted revenge, but I knew that wouldn't fix anything. I needed clarity, closure. I also needed to figure out what to do about Emma. I couldn't just leave everything like this. She was everything to me, and I owed her the truth, even if it broke her heart. I couldn't let her grow up thinking her mother was some kind of victim when she was the one who betrayed us both. One afternoon, I sat down with Emma and explained that Mommy and Uncle Mark had done something very wrong. I told her that sometimes people we love make bad choices, and it's not her fault. That was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, to tell my 5-year-old daughter that her mother had lied and betrayed her family. Emma looked at me with those innocent eyes, confused and scared, but I promised her I'd always be there to protect her. I promised I'd do my best to keep her safe and show her what real love and honesty look like. Meanwhile, Lisa kept trying to contact me, trying to beg me to come back, to forgive her, to give her another chance. She'd call, text, even show up unannounced. But I refused to see her. Every time I looked at her, I saw the bitchy, manipulative woman who'd betrayed everything I stood for. I knew that if I let her back into my life, it would only be a matter of time before she lied again. I couldn't risk Emma's future on someone who thought cheating and lying was okay. I also decided that I needed to be honest with my family. I told my parents everything. They were devastated, especially my dad. He couldn't believe Lisa would do something so cruel, especially during such a vulnerable time. They urged me to get legal advice to protect myself and Emma. I wasn't thinking about that initially, but now I saw the importance of it. I didn't want her to try to manipulate the situation or try to take Emma away. I knew I had to be smart and careful. The thing I learned the most during all this is how fragile trust really is, how quickly it can be shattered by lies and betrayal. I also learned that some people are just selfish, manipulative, and bitchy, and the only way to deal with them is to cut them out of your life. I realized that forgiving her isn't an option anymore, not after everything. I have to move forward for Emma's sake, to give her stability, love, and honesty. I know I'll get through this, even if it's the hardest thing I've ever done. The biggest lesson: never ignore the signs. Never assume the best of someone who's clearly showing you their worst. Trust is earned, not given, and once it's gone, it's nearly impossible to get back. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole ordeal has changed me. I've become more cautious, more guarded. Trust is not something I hand out easily anymore. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought, strong enough to face the truth, even if it's brutal. That betrayal cut deep, but it also forced me to see people for who they really are. Lisa, with her bitchy attitude and manipulative lies, was never who I thought she was. She was just a selfish woman who used my grief and my trust to hide her own selfish desires. I've had to rebuild my life from scratch, focusing on Emma and myself. It's not easy, and I still have moments of anger and sadness. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly forgive her, but I know I have to let go of that bitterness for my own peace. I've learned that revenge isn't the answer. The real victory was walking away, choosing to protect Emma, and cutting out the toxicity that had poisoned everything. The biggest thing I want to share with others who might find themselves in a similar situation is this: don't ignore the signs. Don't brush off your gut feelings. Trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to dig deeper if something feels off. People can hide their true selves for a long time, but eventually their true colors come out. And when they do, don't hesitate. Get out, protect yourself, and do whatever it takes to keep your sanity intact. Most of all, I've learned that you can survive the hardest betrayals. You can come out the other side battered but alive. And sometimes that's all you need, to come out stronger, wiser, and more aware of what real loyalty and honesty look like. I'll always carry the pain of Emma's loss, but I refuse to let her memory be overshadowed by betrayal. I owe her that much, and I owe myself a chance to find happiness again, free from lies and bitchiness. That's where I am now, healing, moving forward, and forever cautious about who I trust. But I still believe in love, just not the kind that blinds you or makes you blind to the truth. I learned that the hard way. And I hope anyone else out there who's been betrayed finds the strength to walk away, to stand up for themselves, and to realize that they deserve better. Always.